what is the result? The farmers are always at a loss, the farmers and the rural folks. This is ruthless growth without taking into account the needs of that society. It is meant, the highways are meant as if mainly for the car manufacturers and the middle and upper middle class people who can afford those cars. That's all. The rest of the population is untouched by this kind of development. So in the light of these facts, I am sure a re-examination of the whole strategy, including the CSR, should be made. Then, of course, jobless growth. We are showing to the world we are growing, we are the fastest growing economy in the world. It was earlier 9% or 8%, now 7.6 or 7.3%. But what is the job situation? Are we creating jobs? Millions of new entrants to the job markets. Do they find it easy? Is it not the responsibility of the companies, the private sector, as well as the government, of course, to create jobs? Look at the banking industry, how the banks operate these days. You need, the number of staff has been reduced drastically. You have a machine for every transaction. If you want to deposit money, there is a machine. Deposit cash, withdraw money, there are ATMs. Your passbook printers, there is a machine. So where are the jobs? The jobs are getting eaten up by this mechanization of banks, banking industry. I remember, and I give this example many times, about 20 years ago, when the banks were computerized, we used to talk to the employees and we used to suggest to them that they should object to this kind of wholesale computerization, because there will be no jobs for your future generations. But the employees, as has been pointed out, they were short-sighted. They were given 2 advanced increments and they were happy that let there be computerization. They never bothered about jobs. Now the situation has arisen that the number of employees, number of jobs offered by banks in our country has reduced drastically. The same is the story of many industrial sectors. Is it not the responsibility of the companies to provide jobs, to create jobs? On the one hand, wholesale computerization, wholesale mechanization. On the other, totally capital-intensive industrial development. So the scope of jobs for our young men and women is getting drastically reduced. I don't think this kind of jobless growth can be supported by a thinking social person. There are, of course, many other issues touched by the various speakers. There was a reference to tourism industry. What are the responsibilities of the tourism industry? I will narrate a delightful joke before you, that in the tourism industry the key role is played by the tourist guides. The tourist guides have to be trained carefully so that they have a sense of belongingness. The joke is that I had a friend who was a tourist guide, and we used to discuss how the guides conduct their tourists. So he said, nothing serious, we are mainly interested in shopping. Because even now, I don't know the latest situation, they used to get a cut off up to 25 or 30% on the purchases made by the tourists. So he said, how we guide at that time it is a 25-old story. The guides were not highly educated. So he was mocking a guide. He said, look, when we conduct the tourists to the Hawa Mahal, we explain, look here sir, this is Palace of Winds, small windows, Maharani is watching procession, let us go shopping. So that is what they were interested in. Not having any sense of belongingness or presenting properly in a cultured manner, because they know that the tourists are there, the fat American dollar-wielding tourists there for just 2 days or 3 days, and to take the best advantage of their presence, they must shop more and more so that the guides get a cut. That is the situation of the tourism. Now, of course, it is, I believe, developing more responsible socially, like you have ecotourism or rural tourism and other kinds of tourism. That is a happy augury with the tourism industry. We have, for example, rootless growth, culture. The culture, in the great Indian culture is getting eroded. You know the famous dialogue from the movie, am I getting late? Okay, I'll conclude in 2 or 3 minutes. The famous dialogue from the movie that what has the American NRI got? The big house and jewelry and money and car. And the Indian, poor Indian relative, he has got sanskar. Not car but sanskar. But what is happening to those sanskars now? I think those sanskaras are getting eroded. The culture is being eroded day by day, and westernization is making a great impact. Somebody talked about happiness in Bhutan. That the Bhutanese people believe in GNH, gross national happiness, and not GNP or GDP. I happen to make a study of the situation. Well, the gentleman, the professor who presented, he made it very nicely. But what I found was that the level of literacy in Bhutan is very low. It is less than 50%, if I remember correctly, about 47 or 48%. So when the people are not lit. You see, that was the situation in Rajasthan state at the time of independence. In the Rajputana area, as it was called, the total number of literate people was just 13 lakh only in the entire Rajputana area. So if you are illiterate, if you are having some money and cheap goods, you can feel very happy. But is it real happiness? That may be the situation in Bhutan. Of course, there are other factors also. I am not saying that they are pretending or feigning happiness. That is not my intention. But the level of literacy is very, very important. And there are countries, for example, Scandinavian countries, highly educated people, a reasonably high standard of living, reasonably high income. That would talk about the HDI, Human Development Index. Our country, what is the HDI for India? 135. 100 out of 200 countries, we stand at 135 number. Very, very low. Countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, Australia, these are the countries on top of the Human Development Index. So, literacy is also very important. There are 3 or 4 factors taken into account. Health, income of the people, and educational level. These factors decide your development. So it is not correct to say that even if people are semi-literate or illiterate, they can be happy. It would be the happiness, as somebody pointed out, it would be happiness of a pig who doesn't know what is happiness and he feels happy. Although this is not the main topic for our today's session. Well, these are, friends, some of my reactions and viewpoints on today's session. I thank all the speakers who are absent, and I thank all the paper presenters who made excellent presentations. Finally, I thank the organizers, our dean and our organizing secretaries and so on, for inviting me to be able to participate in this academic exercise. Thank you very much.
For the remaining paper presentations and the fourth technical session, we shall resume post-lunch at 1 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Jaipur. I request our esteemed guests to kindly take their seats on the dais. A token of our remembrance.
I think there is a long list of papers being submitted here for this session. So it is really an uphill task to accommodate all the presenters. And before I invite the presenters, let me, without wasting any time, I'll ask Mr. Rajat to have his presentation first. So he'll speak for about 25-30 minutes, and then I'll invite the presenters as much as possible. Let me see how much time is remaining. Then I'll ration the time accordingly. So I request Rajat to please, no, you take your own time because your input is more important. Would you like to take this mic or? No, that's up to you. That's absolutely at your.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to the National Conference on Corporate Governance, New Paradigms. I'm a stockbroker, and though I've studied economics, my presentation to you is going to be from more of a practical viewpoint of what corporate governance and finance involves. So of course, I will give you some basic theory as to how at least we in the stock market look at corporate governance and what is the importance of corporate governance, and I'll get to the point of how we study finance in link with that and what is the role of finance that I would like to explain to you. So corporate governance, some definitions first, is basically refers to the way in which a corporation is governed. Now you all must be aware that a corporation, all big companies have CEOs, a board of directors, independent directors, and etc. 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 Now, why this is required is that big companies don't actually have owners which run them. This is not like some small company in Jaipur where the owner is the manager and his brother is the vice president and etc. etc. as is with most family concerns. When you have companies which are owned by somebody else and run by somebody else, then corporate governance is important. Now, the owners, that is the shareholders from the stock market perspective, are the providers of finance. What I mean by that, that they provide the money by which the company is run. So they are effectively financing the company because they can't run it. They have professional management to run it. And here comes the problem. I'll give you an example. Supposing you go and decide to buy a car, a taxi, let's say Innova, and you hire a driver and you tell him, okay, go to the railway station, stand there every day and run the car for passengers, whatever you earn, come back, we'll do our hisab, and let's say I keep 80% and you keep 20%. So you are the owner because you provided the money to purchase the car, and the taxi driver is effectively the CEO or the manager, all in one, the worker. Now, what is corporate governance? Corporate governance is a system in which you make sure that he does what benefits you. He doesn't have to work for your benefit. He is going to try and make his own money, and you have to make sure that he earns you money. So your system can be as simple as you just try and find an honest guy and you trust him and you know that he will not cheat you, and that's your system of corporate governance. Or it could be as complex as having a video camera in the taxi, a GPS system for location. All these things are a technical solution. Now this is a simple example which involves you as an owner and one guy running a taxi on your behalf. When the same thing applies to a gigantic corporation, that doesn't work. Another example, let's say 10 of you get together, put in 1 lakh rupees and buy a taxi. Now there are 10 of you, you're 10 investors, you're the providers of finance. And then you appoint one of you to actually manage the company. So you've already got one level more of complexity. There are 10 of you who have to first agree on the guy who you appointed to run the show, and then he has to then make sure or be honest or be ethical or be monitored in a way that you're all silent partners. You're not actually involved in the organization. One person is looking after the management, the day-to-day functioning, and you are dependent on that one person to actually earn money, report the money honestly, run it, that means run it competently, run it honestly, and then actually share the profits with you in the manner that you may have agreed beforehand. So this is a straightforward example of how complex just 10 guys getting together to buy a taxi and having one guy manage it can become. When you have corporations which have no owner, like let me give you an example. ITC. I'm sure all of you have heard of ITC. They make cigarettes, they have hotels. Who owns ITC? Nobody. The shareholders, millions of them. So there is a CEO. Who does he answer to? Well, he's supposed to work for the shareholders. But I also own 100 shares of ITC. So I just can't say, okay, hi, I own ITC stock. Hi, what are you doing, man? This is not correct. I want you to do this. He will not listen to me because I am nobody. Even though I am an owner of the company. Effectively, the CEO of ITC reports to me. But actually he reports to hundreds and thousands of investors like me. So, how do we, hundreds and thousands of investors, make sure that the CEO of ITC runs the company in a manner in which we make money? After all, his interests and our interests should be the same, but they might not be. Supposing it's an economic downturn and we want ITC to do cost cutting, but he wants to fly first class. His management team thinks that we are all entitled to fly everywhere business class. Now, I am the owner, but there is no way for me to enforce this on the management. This is where corporate governance comes in, that we shareholders who are the providers of finance for a company need and want a system by which the management who effectively works for us guarantees us some kind of, or not guarantees, tries to earn us the return and takes the corporation in the direction we want it to go. Maximize, buzzword, shareholder value, etc., etc., etc. Now, another definition in the specifically in the Indian context. Now there is a Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is supposed to basically regulate the stock market and make sure that we, the small investors, are not cheated. So what does the SEBI, Securities Board of Exchange Board of India, say about corporate governance? So corporate governance is defined as the acceptance by the management of the inalienable rights of the shareholder as the true owners of the corporation and of their own role as trustees on the behalf of the shareholders. It's about commitment to values, about ethical business conduct, and about making a distinction between personal corporate funds in the management of the company. So three key words. That corporate governance is about making sure that the managers running a company understand they are not the owners. The people who have bought the stock, the shareholders of the company are the owners. That's the first point. That the management is not owners, though they are effectively in control. Okay. Secondly, that they have to run the business like a trustee, which is acting on behalf of somebody else. And that there is a distinction between personal funds of the CEO, the various people in the management, and the funds of the company. Now, as I'll explain to you in a later example, this doesn't always happen. That management treats the shareholders, who are the actual owners and providers of finance, as outsiders, as nobody, as people they don't have to answer to, and they treat companies which they are supposedly there just to run for the benefit of others as their own personal fiefdoms. It's quite common, for this kind of human tendency to occur. And then it gets even more complicated because you as a small shareholder will never have the same information that the CEO of a company has. What is called the agency problem or asymmetric information. Asymmetric information is a very fancy word of saying, I know something you don't. You're ignorant about something, but I'm aware of it. So you may think that this chair that I may think that this chair, see, I have come here today. I don't know anything about this place. So I may think that, what a fancy audio-visual room. But you actually might know that upstairs all the wiring is rotting and in trouble. That's something you as an insider, as a regular person know, but I as an outsider do not know. So to me, you can always present a very slick, fancy picture, if you wish to. That is not to say that all managements are like that, or this audio-visual room has terrible wiring. I mean, pardon the example, perhaps not the right example. But basically what I'm trying to say is that anybody who's on the inside can very easily fool somebody on the outside if they so wish to. So this is where corporate governance comes in, that there is a system, there are laws, there are practices, and there are methods, all of which are governed to make sure that you, the small investor, you, the small shareholder, get a fair deal. But this is not always the case, and that is why companies which are perceived to have high corporate governance standards are preferred as investments. So I'll come to that in a little later. Now, let's come down to what we perceive as high standards of corporate governance. We've already established that without high standards of corporate governance, you, the shareholder, the provider of finance, are in the wrong place. If you are investing in a company, or you are a silent partner in an enterprise where the motives of the persons running the show, you do not trust them, or you have no system of making sure that they will act in your favor, then you are not in the right setup, and you should not enter into such setups, or if you enter into them by mistake, then you should get out of such an investment or agreement as soon as you can. That is the basic deal about corporate governance. It's a body of rules. Now, many agencies across the world, like the SEBI, like the Securities Exchange Commission in America, the UK equivalent, the EU equivalent, they have all created very tight rules. But let me tell you from practical example, you can have all the rules in the world you want. If I want to do something as a CEO of a company which has millions of shareholders, I can do it. Okay. There is this company called Crompton Greaves. They make fans and coolers. I don't know if you've heard about it. This company was going through a tough period, and the management went ahead and bought a personal transport jet aeroplane. So, here it is, a company which is using the money of its shareholders, and the company is losing money, company is going through a tough time. Instead of cost cutting, the executives go ahead and buy a jet. Now, there is no law that can prevent them from buying a jet. They are just a set of best practices. There is no law at all. So if they want to go ahead and buy a jet, they can do it. The only option available to you is that you can decide that I'm going to sell off the Crompton Greaves stock that I own, and I'm not going to invest in this company. You can only walk away. You can't actually prevent them from doing what they can. So trust actually, rather than law, becomes the critical element. You must not, laws are necessary. Laws are being enacted on a regular basis to improve. It's like 20 years ago, managements could get away with outright fraud. Today, even in India, you can't commit fraud and get away with it. I mean, if you do, you'll end up in jail. And I'm going to come to that example very soon, where both fraud and corporate governance and everything is involved. So, now we come to the part of practice, which is where my experience as a stock market trader investor comes in. I want you, if you ever invest in the stock market, to always remember this. Analyze the corporate governance standard at the company which you want to invest it in first. Most people get carried away about the profitability of the company, the future prospects of the company, etc., 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 etc. But first analyze the company. It's like if you can't trust the company, you can't trust the people running it. There's a Hindi word कि कोई आपको कमा के क्यों देगा? कोई आपको पैसा कमा के क्यों देगा? Are you some kind of special person that someone will work to earn money and then give it to you? Well, there are a limited number of people who actually practice high standards of corporate governance, whether laws exist or not, and those are the persons and those are the companies and those are the managements that you need to invest in. It's of no use if the company makes a lot of money, but you as the shareholder get nothing. If it's all spent by the management in buying jet planes and on corporate vacations to Pondicherry and Goa and having fancy offices and everybody having chauffeur-driven cars, that money is actually legitimately belongs to you, the shareholder. But you're never going to get it. So they may keep showing great profitability, great returns, great everything, but you're not going to get it. So there is no point in entering into these kind of companies. Now I don't know if you guys have heard of Warren Buffett or not, but he is probably the greatest investor, stock market investor alive today. And he owns this company called Berkshire Hathaway in the US, and it's a huge company. And he has probably the best standards of corporate governance in his company. And he writes these letters to shareholders every year. And probably there is nobody who is more forthright than him in the corporate world, in perhaps the whole world, in explaining to the average shareholder, because he owns a very complex set of businesses. Yet he goes out of his way to try to explain to you what these businesses do. He doesn't do what most managements do, is that they hide the real deal and present you with a very rosy picture and then make it very so complex that nobody wants to read those reports. I mean, everybody gets these 20, 30 page annual reports from companies, and all the real meaningful important stuff is hidden in footnotes at the very end with such tiny print that nobody is going to read. This is what most companies do. All the relevant important stuff is hidden in footnotes. It fulfills the letter of the law but not the spirit of the law. They disclose everything but in such a complicated manner that 99% people are never going to get that information. Warren Buffett makes an effort to actually simplify everything to plain English. No fancy terms, no jargon, no complexity, so that the normal person can understand what, because you see, the person who owns those shares is effectively the owner. And Warren Buffett not only understands that, he accepts it and he respects it. That you guys are the owners and I am going to make an effort because I actually am your employee. You will have very few chief executive officers who will come out and, well, they might say that we work for shareholders, but nobody actually takes the pain and the effort to, educate and try to communicate with shareholders. And he has a theory behind it. And this theory, I think, is the best standard for corporate governance in the real world that I have been able to find. What he says is, today I am the CEO and you are the shareholder. I am sitting on the dais, you are sitting in front of me. I will tell you everything that I would like to tell you, I would want that you should tell me, should our positions be reversed? Should a day come where you are sitting on the dais and I am sitting on the chair in front of you as the audience? So I want to behave with you in a manner, in an open manner, in a forthright manner that I expect you to behave with me. Because that's the only way, if our positions are reversed. That's his only rule. And if you think about it, it's such a perfect rule. It's that old, do unto others as you would like others to do unto you. So he practices this, not just preaches. All managers will preach it. Lip service. If you attend any corporate governance, and hopefully in the future you will, any kind of annual general meeting of any company in the world, there will be lot of lip service to shareholder value maximization, lot of fancy words. But then when you read the report, if you actually end up reading the entire report, you will find that at the bottom, at the back of it, in the middle of some paragraph, there is one footnote, very fine print, which actually says that, oh, while they are telling me to buy shares, the CEO of the company has actually been slowly selling off his own shares in the company. There are laws against it, but you can always hope that people don't find out, and you do it. So big slogans, but actually something else is happening. Very common practice. So anyway, this is what corporate governance in the stock market means, and its relation to finance with the shareholders or the providers of finance. Now to an example. You must have heard of Dr. Vijay Malaya. He is a flamboyant businessman who owns a couple of liquor companies and was also the owner of Kingfisher Airlines, which has now been shut down. Now, Dr. Vijay Malaya is the, you can say, best example of lowest standard of corporate governance in India. Okay, best example of worst system of corporate governance. His companies are completely driven to benefit him and to basically take the money from the shareholder and give him nothing. That's how it's all designed. Now, the example I want to get to is that in 2012 June, his company called McDowell, which makes alcohol, whiskey, rum, vodka, etc., the share price was about 600 rupees. And some rumors began to float in the market that some big investor is looking to invest in United States. The share price began to rise. In September, that is within 2 months, from 600 it had reached 1000. At that time, an announcement was made that Diageo, which is another global alcohol company, and they make Smirnoff and Johnny Walker and blah blah. They are the biggest alcohol company in the world. Was looking to take an investment stake in Dr. Vijay Mallya's company. This is just an announcement, and you've already gone from 600 to 1000. In November of that year, so 4 months have passed, a deal is announced, and the share price has gone to 1350. So 600, 1350, in about 5 months the share price is doubled. In May 2013, that is about, if you count from September to May, that's about 7 months. When the deal is, when 10% stake is purchased, United Spirits is now 2500 rupees. So you've gone from 600, but that was based on rumors. So let's take the official date of the announcement, from 1000 to 2500. So you've 2.5 times. In the same time, nothing has changed in the business of the company. They sell the same products, it's manned by the same management. Only thing that has happened is that Vijay Mallya is making way for Diageo. So what's happening here? What's happening here is that a company with poor corporate governance standards is being replaced by a management which is believed to be of much higher corporate governance standards. It's a pure re-rating where you made 4 times, the worth of the company went up 4 times based simply on the fact that earlier there was a crook running the show, now there's a relatively honest management running the show. Nothing changed in the underlying fundamentals, nothing at all. Why I'm trying to explain this point is, here's a very, very real world example where purely on this one factor alone, if you could have judged it as others judged it, you saw a share price going up 2.5 times. So as an investor, if you can make from 1000 to 2,500 in 7 months, I think you could be called a super investor. And that's a huge return in 7 months. And of course, let me clarify, I did not make this money, but other people in my group and social circle and business circle did make this. They did guess, they realized, they acted on it, and they doubled their money in less than 4 months. So this is how corporate governance works in the real world. That poor corporate governance standard is 600 bucks. International standards is 2,500 bucks in 7 months. That deal took 7 months. If it had happened in 2 days, you would have found it had gone to 2,500 in 2 days. The point is not how long it took. It would have happened in 2 days had the deal changed, had the management changed in 2 days. And finally, by the way, the story doesn't end there. As Diageo began to actually clean up the corporate structure of McDowell, United Spirits, the stock actually peaked out at close to 4,000 rupees. So in about 1.5 years, you've gone from 600 to 4,000. That's a lot of money to be made. That is a lot of money to be made. That is about 15 times. 8 times. I'm getting the maths wrong. 8, 9 times in a year. You know, if you can 10 times your wealth in a year, give me some money when you earn that much. So anyway, this is what I wanted to come to. That this is what high standards of corporate governance can do for an investor, for the person who's providing the finance. And I'll just finish off because I believe many people want to give their own views. I just want to leave you some, since I am a stockbroker and I advise people on buying stocks, so this is not exactly connected to corporate governance, but something practical. for you if you ever go in the stock market to invest. First, check that the promoters of a company have good reputation, are known to be competent, and are willing to share profits with you in form of dividends, buyback, and of course capital appreciation. You know, they have to be competent and honest. If somebody is very competent but he's not honest, he's going to make money, but you're not going to get anything. After you have established the competence and honesty of the management, then only look whether the business is actually good or bad. No point analyzing the business good or bad as long as the management is not honest. Okay. After you have analyzed the business being good or bad, then only analyze the price. So analyze the management, analyze the business, and then analyze the price. That is the price today depressed? Am I getting a good price, or is it overpriced and I am jumping into the last leg of a rally? All three tests the matter has to pass. Even if one is missing, you will not make money. If the first one is missing, you will lose money for sure. If the management is not honest, you will lose money for sure. So analyze all 3 points, and then let me tell you that when you actually start studying the stock market from these 3 perspectives, you will find that very few investment ideas actually pass all 3 tests. In your lifetime, you will be lucky to find 20. Sometimes you will find that the promoters are competent and honest, the business is very profitable, but the price is too high. Sometimes you will find that the price is good, but the business is not profitable. Sometimes you will find that everything else is good, but the management is not honest. Sometimes you will find something else missing. All 3 factors will come together very rarely. I assure you, not more than 20 times in your lifetime, in your entire lifetime, will you find such ideas. So when you do, when you are able to actually make the judgment that all 3 criteria have been met, buy as much as you can, as much money as you have at that point of time, and then simply continue to check that all 3 criteria are still valid. So get in, stay alert, and don't get out. Do not exit. Let it be. That is where real wealth is made. Where something which is tick on all 3 points, that is where it will take you from something being a 10 rupee stock to being a, it's like Titan Industries. I don't know if you know, Titan makes watches, Titan makes glasses. Titan Industries was 40 rupees 10 years ago. Titan Industries today is, it's been split, but actually it's 4,000 rupees in 10 years. It's 4,000 rupees in 10 years. Okay? Because the management is honest, the business is wonderful, and 40 rupees was a great price. A person who bought at 2,000 only doubled his money, but a person who bought at 40 is somewhere else only. I don't know if you've heard of Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala is the Warren Buffett of India. And basically he made his money in Titan Industries. 10, 12 years ago he was a rich guy, but today he's a very rich guy. And bulk of it has come out of only Titan Industries. And basically he got in, he realized the potential, he realized the fact that Tata Group is honest management, competent management, business prospects are good, and I'm getting a good price. And he just stayed. And that's the end of it. And this is the basic nutshell of the whole story. So I hope I have been able to put my point across to you in a normal manner that everybody got it. I think that's all. I think this concludes my presentation.
Reserve the constituency of asking questions later on. And one thing is very sure, that what Rajat meant was that how you do things, why you do things, and what are you doing. These are the 3 basic pillars of what is supposed to be taken care of. So far as the corporate governance is concerned. I am reserving my comments now, but I think I have got almost a list of 40 papers, and I have to wind up this session by 3 o'clock. So naturally,
the post-lunch session, and of course time is reduced. I would not take much time to explain what this
see, the real
research is all
problem lies
about.
with the chairman, not with the speaker.
Very well. I would take the liberty of sharing my gist of the research with you. I'm sure it's not working. Can I have the slides, please, sir? It's okay. It has really helped me cutting down the session by minutes, because what my concept in this paper was how a corporate understanding of operations for multi-level and multi-unit structures in the organization helps to optimize and increase the productivity of profitability and customer satisfaction. My research paper was basically based on the implementation of ISO 22000 certification for hotels in India. I'm sure this is not a very common topic, so let me just brief you out what exactly is FSMS. It's Food Safety Management System, which is a tool, a guidance tool and a standard for any food business operator in the world to follow, implement and sustain regularly to ensure that whatever food is being packaged, distributed, served or consumed is safe to all levels. Unless otherwise, the organization falls under a purview of penalization, which could be capital, which could be imprisonment, so on and so forth. This particular paper talks about a food business sector of hotels and restaurants. Why hotels only out of the myriad, the plethora of food businesses in the world, is because we pay for something which is good in quality, pertains to our prior motive and objective of visiting a place where we combine leisure with taste. It's not a mandate for anyone to visit a hotel for something, right? The hotels thus fall under the purview of serving safe food by being beheld by a moral and social obligation of doing so, because they are being paid for the food or the beverage that they serve. The objective here is to understand the significance of this particular standard, the ISO 22000, which is a standard brought in by the International Organization for Standardization for Food Businesses, and how far have an organization been able to understand the benefits and sustenance with this particular standard in their structure. The methodology of this paper was using the inputs from 25 hotels all across the country, analyzing the approach taken up by the consultants and the departmental feedbacks from each and every department of the hotel, and of course supported by the questionnaire given by the hotels to us. By an understanding of this entire research, we got to know of a few challenges which are not being able to change the mindsets of people, commensuration of the departmental hiring of manpower resources, the implementation costs of such projects in India, quality of infrastructure, that is the availability of good consultants for the implementation of a good plan in these hotels, the manpower recruitments, and of course understanding the concept of the process improvement which is required by each and every department in these hotels, and the enhancement, the improvisation of the quality by the use of a certification programs which does not come free of cost. What we were able to understand was that after having been certified by this standard, each and every hotel gained a due diligence defense mechanism, which actually is that when you don't have any standard in place, When I'm talking about a standard, for you to understand, you can also talk about any standards like UGC and AC for your universities as well. When you don't have a standard to follow, implement and sustainably continue, you do not have a defense mechanism for yourself to prove your stand if in case there is a problem or a troubleshooting. We got to know of a better standpoint with the vendors and the vendor management. This is a very important point when we were talking about the United Breweries Group for Dr. Malia. Reduced wastage in the operations, process improvement, and of course a closer link with the global statutory knowledge bank, which aids you in terms of any important innovation, technological upgradation, or any system upgradation which happens in the country regarding food businesses. When we talk about the significance of the impact of ISO 22000 certification on corporate governance, this is the conclusion, sir. We did find that the centralization of the processes helped the management systems in designing of a common standard operating procedure based on brand positioning of the brands, which were Taj Hotels Group, Shangri-Las, the ITCs and the Hyatts. A quality assurance system, the training programs which are designed on a centralized level. The association of the corporates with the national law enforcing body increased because of having a standard in place. Management of external services and the performance evaluations based on were increased by 70% when there was an implementation of a standard like ISO 22000. Thanks so much. I hope I have been able to put forward the understanding of corporate governance.
Thank you, Sumit. Now I invite Ankita Chaturvedi.
Frauds or scandals. Accounting frauds has been the main problems and is arising in the variety of forms. This paper is basically a secondary data based paper, and it focuses on the different corporate frauds in India, the people responsible for such frauds, and some of the preventive measures to be overcome such frauds. And this will be led by Meenu Joshi now.
As she has already mentioned the introduction part, I would like to tell you all the recent accounting frauds and scams in India. Among all the mentioned fraud, the biggest scandal was at Satyam Computers Limited, which was of 14,000 crores.
We have gone through in past sessions.
Preventive measures.
Following out the preventive measures by using the technique of corporate governance, the primary responsibility for preventing fraud is on management, which should focus or check on the regular basis whether the system in the organization is adequate to detect frauds once they have taken place in the shortest possible time. Next is the company should have an active and strong audit committee so that the independent auditors working will be supportive, and the system of selection and appointment of auditor on their quality and experience need to be explored. The government should also update the organizational policy and see that every organization should strictly follow it rather than putting it into the paper. Also, the forensic accounting is also important in improving the role of corporate governance as well as helps in formulating and establishing of efficient control system. Next is the conclusion. The essence of corporate governance lies in promoting and maintaining reliability, transparency, accountability and the management of the organization. One positive outcome of the biggest corporate scandals like Satyam was a wide reforms to corporate governance, which provided a whistleblower protection to the organization and people associated with it. The accounting policies and procedures should update at par with global standards, and auditors can be given complete independence and disclosure. The financial data with the forensic accounting process should also be taken into consideration, which is a basic solution for accounting frauds. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I, Aditi Jain, along with my friend Preksha Baradia, is going to address the topic accounting frauds and corporate governance. As we all know that accounting records are which disclose the earnings and the accounting activities of an organization are the reliable sources for all the stakeholders. Thus, any misleading information or irregularity in such records can be regarded as accounting frauds, which not only affects the shareholders but all the stakeholders of the organization. Since we are talking about the corporate governance, thus we must know how accounting frauds and corporate governance are related. Well, the fundamental objective of corporate governance is to frame rules, regulation, frame the policies of the organization, protect the investors, in fact all the stakeholders, and penalize them for any irresponsible behavior. Thus, when any accounting fraud is committed, it can question the role of a corporate governance, or we can say that an accounting fraud can be reckoned as the failure of corporate governance.
Talking about its causes, first is non-independence or internal audit department, complexity, poor management of information, pressure, ineffective corporate boards, voluntarily and cutthroat competition. As here, all of us are aware about Satyam scam, in which the fraud was penetrated by inflating the revenue of the company through false sales invoices and showing corresponding gains by forging bank statements. Investors faced the loss of rupees 14,162 crore, while the family secured illegal gains worth rupees 2,743 crores.
Another glaring example of accounting fraud or the failure of corporate governance is of Toshiba Corporation of Japan. Well, the scam began in the year 2008 and came out in the year 2015 when its CEO then, Mr. Hisao Tanaka, resigned due to $1.2 billion of overstated operating profits. The Toshiba fraud had uncovered the apparent rise in the corporate governance of Japan. Some of the preventive measures of preventing the accounting fraud or bringing it down are strong internal control, checking up even on slightest deviation, reconciliation of accounts, evaluating the fraud allegation. These measures can serve the purpose to reduce the accounting frauds.
These frauds may have a bad impact like future foreign investment and economic growth. There will be loss of goodwill and reputation of the company. Investors will lose their money and there will be distrust on the companies. So at last, we would like to conclude, even the increasing number of accounting frauds in the corporate sector are enough to certify the fact that the existing corporate governance system is lacking behind in preventing the risk of accounting irregularities and frauds. Therefore, all we need is a more active and strict corporate governance that provides transparency, disclosure, honesty in the system, and a regular check in the company accounting activities by the officials. And with this, the company should understand it too, that these rules and regulations are for their good only. So every person in the corporate world need to contribute to make the corporate governance better. In the end, we would like to quote, corporate governance is not something that is put in place and then left. Ensuring its effectiveness depends on regular independent review. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maximum complexities and the maximum compliance also. And still the corporate governance is lacking. Kindly search the answer. What is the answer of this question? Now I am inviting another presenter, Bismarck.
First, I would like to tell you what are the microfinance institutions.
Please don't define the microfinance. Just straight away come to the question of CG, that is corporate governance in the microfinance.
The whole point of this study is to know the performance of microfinance institutions. The findings and conclusions are corporate governance helps in strengthening the performance of microfinance institutions and helps in outreaching in the microfinance institution in more rural areas. And the internal governance mechanism have minimum effect on the performance, but both diversity helps in many ways in the performance. And the lastly is the corporate governance helps in keeping the microfinance institution in check with their objectives. Mission drift is very low in these institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. अभी ये ध्यान रखना, स्टेट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया इज अंडर फायर नाउ दिस डेज बिकॉज ऑफ विजय माल्या.
The topic of my study is corporate governance practices in banking sector, a case study of SBI.
Yes, please carry on.
Indian banking industry is the backbone of country's economy. Has
ये मत बताओ हमको ये back because I am hearing for last 50 years. India is an agriculturally dominant country. India is a rich country habited by poor. Please come conclusion statement.
The objective of the research paper is to evaluate the corporate governance practices in banking sector through a case study of SBI. For evaluation purpose, this research paper is divided into two parts based on different elements of this SBI. Secondary data has been used and evaluated for the practice of corporate governance in SBI. SBI ensures good corporate governance in order to achieve excellence, transparency, and for maximization of shareholders' value and wealth. There is need to be an appropriate balance between regulatory and voluntary corporate governance requirements. Findings are, the study found that the SBI is implementing all the provisions of corporate governance according to RBI and Government of India directions. It is found that SBI, the country's largest commercial bank, performed well in every aspect in terms of profits, assets, deposits, branches, employees and services to the customers. The study concluded that the corporate governance practice in the State Bank of India should improve for the best investment policies, appropriate internal control systems, better credit risk management, better customer service, and adequate automation in order to achieve excellence, transparency, and maximization.
Is there any suggestion you have given to achieve these objectives or these conclusions?
Yes, sir.
Can you give some suggestions?
So by providing transparency and
They have already done it. Please carry on.
to achieve excellency, transparency, and maximization of shareholders' value and wealth.
Thank you.